I'm kind of so confused how this ended up getting past the realm of just like him being a sleazeball and paying off a mistress, which, I mean, is bad. And I love seeing people who cheat on their spouses get caught up in their own webs. But to have the government getting involved and charges actually being filed is where I'm a little bit lost. Is Trump going to jail? A potential ban on TikTok and quick hits. You're listening to the Base Politics Podcast with Hannah Cox and Brad Polumbo. Let's jump in. Good morning, Brad.
Hey, how's it going?
Oh, it's going good. I had my sister in town this weekend. She left yesterday, so I'm kind of missing her. But we had a fun St. Patrick's Day and just like girls' weekend. I have a flat tire I have to deal with this morning after we finish filming, though, so I'm kind of dreading that.
Oh.
Yeah, and you know my stance that women should not have to deal with car issues. So I'm like, would like a man to like pop up out of the woodwork and handle this, but it's probably going to be
Hannah's a feminist until she has a car issue.
Truly,
and she wants the patriarchy to come in and save the day.
Yeah, I'm a strong, independent woman until I have car issues, and then I lose my mind. Like I can't emotionally handle car issues or roaches. The two things in life I absolutely need men to deal with for me. So I'll hand it to them for that. How was your weekend?
That's funny. It was great. My boyfriend and I went to Chicago to see Joshua Bassett in concert. So for folks that don't know, he is the star of High School Musical, the series, and he is Olivia Rodrigo's ex. So he's the one who she wrote all her popular songs about: Driver's License, Good for You, Traitor, and she really smeared him, even though he actually was it's like a big debate, Olivia Rodrigo versus Joshua Bassett. We're 100% team Josh. He was good live. He's very chaotic. We're a little worried about him. He's got a touch of the Kanye going on at the moment. He's kind of like a musical savant, but he's doing some crazy stuff, like not at our show, but at the one he did before us. He went out on the balcony, like very high up, and walked along the railing while singing. And like from a distance, that if he'd fallen, he would have died.
He wasn't on ropes. They didn't have him strapped.
No.
Oh.
And he wasn't supposed to do it. He's just chaotic. He runs into the audience. He's a really entertaining performer, but it's giving mental duress a little bit. So, and also he just recently popped up at one of these LA mega churches and declared his rediscovered love for Jesus Christ.
Oh boy.
So like nothing wrong with that, but when you combine it with the erratic behavior, it's like he's going through a little bit, clearly. But
yeah.
I thought he was good.
It's usually kind of a tell when they pop up at a mega church, so like things might not be going great. Speaking of erratic behavior at concerts, I saw this TikTok from Taylor Swift over the weekend where she has this new stunt when she's performing. There's like a hole cut in the stage, okay? And her whole stunt is that like she dives into it, and then you have this huge animation where it's supposed to look like she's like swimming across the stage underwater. Very cool theatrics, but when she jumps into the hole, it looks like she's committing suicide. Like she just, and I don't know where she goes, and the audience is literally screaming when she does it. Like it's actually a terrifying effect. My sister and I watched it 3 times and we're cracking up. I was like, this is not giving what you think it's giving. And I want to know, like, what is she actually flying into when she does it? Like something, I mean, she's nosediving like into the stage. So I need to know what's going on with her. So yeah, both of those sound like pretty chaotic performances to witness. I'm glad you guys had a good time. I'm not listening to his music, so I guess I'll have to go hear his side of the story versus Olivia and see where I fall. I haven't been caught up in that debate. I have been very involved in the Selena Gomez versus Haley Baldwin, Swim Fan Baldwin debate on TikTok. Have you been overtaken with that and your algorithm?
I have heard of that. It's kind of boring to me, though, to be honest with you. It also seems very one-sided, like Selena's in the right.
Yeah, it's pretty apparent that Haley Baldwin is basically trying to cut off Selena Gomez's skin and wear it around at this point. Like, I don't really think there's a whole lot of nuance in the debate, but I started following Selena, Team Selena, and I didn't realize how much she had done. That she's produced all these shows, has a huge makeup line, is also an amazing singer. So I actually kind of have become a fan of hers in the process. But anyways, we've got bigger fish to fry this week on the podcast. We'll move into our actual subjects. Brad, is Trump about to go to jail?
Well, not for very long at the most, I guess I'll say. So basically, the internet exploded and political media went into overdrive recently on Sunday night when Trump truthed, that's what he calls his version of a tweet on his app's Truth Social, that he expects to be arrested on Tuesday, which is when we're recording this. Now, that might not actually happen, but he expects to be arrested and indicted by Manhattan DA Alvin Bragg over charges that relate to alleged campaign finance violations and business fraud charges that date back to 2016. If this happens, Hannah, it would be the first time ever that a president has been indicted and arrested after leaving office. And it all goes back to 2016 when Trump allegedly, and to be fair, it's alleged, he denies it, but there's a big paper trail backing this up, paid off a porn star, Stormy Daniels, over $100,000 so that she wouldn't go public about the affair she and Trump allegedly had in 2006 while he was married, and this was actually shortly after Melania had given birth to their child. Now, do you remember when this broke? This broke in 2018. I believe it was the Wall Street Journal, and it was kind of a scandal. I remember it. Do you?
Yeah, I remember it. I didn't, to be honest, follow it that closely because, one, there were just so many scandals that came out during that year against Trump, and it was kind of hard to keep up. Two, for me, I tend to really not care all that much what somebody does in their personal life. I kind of assume most politicians are sleazebags. I assume most are having affairs. Nothing about this surprised me, given things Trump has said about, grabbing women by the pussy and other things of that nature. So I don't think I really blinked. I'm like, yeah, the fact that he would cheat on his pregnant wife with a porn star tracks, that makes perfect sense to me. And I mean, it kind of seemed like he just kept it moving. I knew that there was a payoff to her. I'm kind of so confused how this ended up getting past the realm of just like him being a sleazeball and paying off a mistress, which, I mean, is bad. And I love seeing people who cheat on their spouses get caught up in their own webs. But to have the government getting involved and charges actually being filed is where I'm a little bit lost.
Yeah, it's not actually illegal to pay somebody off to keep quiet about something.
Right.
That happens all the time. Have you ever heard of an NDA and a settlement? Like, that is extremely common practice. But the crime alleged is that Trump, when he made this payment, that it was an undisclosed in-kind campaign contribution, which means non-monetary or indirect. Like, for example, if I gift your campaign for office, if I gift you a car, that would be an in-kind donation. And there's a limit. I don't know exactly what the limit is on how much you can donate to a campaign as an individual, but this $100K plus payment would be above that limit, and it wasn't disclosed.
So where did the money come from? He paid his campaign this money, and then the money got passed to her?
No. So his lawyer paid her off, Michael Cohen, paid off Stormy Daniels, and then Trump personally reimbursed the lawyer. So what they're saying is that Trump's spending money for this purpose was an in-kind contribution to his campaign because it was supposedly done so that she didn't come out earlier in 2016 when he was running and spoil and go public with the story and, hurt his chances.
So just to be clear, this would be him making an in-kind donation to his campaign above the limits of what he's supposed to be able to do.
Yes, which you're not allowed to. You're not allowed to put unlimited money into your own campaign.
Yes.
You can put money into PACs and such, but that gets complicated. But this is where things get messy because the crime alleges a campaign finance violation and business fraud charges related to the payment that was made. But this is messy because that really should be a federal charge. A campaign finance violation would be a federal charge, but federal prosecutors looked into this case and decided not to prosecute. They thought it was too weak a case against Trump. So then what you have is the Manhattan DA, his predecessor actually also looked at this case, because remember, this goes back quite some time now to 2016, and decided it was too weak a case to move forward. But then this new guy, Alvin Bragg, was elected a few years ago, and he is a far-left prosecutor. He's been involved in other controversies. He's one of these progressive prosecutors that the right loves to say are soft on crime, and all that's neither here or there, but he's George Soros funded his campaign. He's a very ideological, kind of left-oriented prosecutor. He came in and he essentially reversed his predecessor's decision and decided, yes, we are going to go after Trump on this. And he's trying to shoehorn it into a state law and say, because this really, a campaign finance thing is a federal issue.
Right.
But he's trying to shoehorn it into a state law that's actually a misdemeanor, unless you can connect it to a felony, which in this case would be the felony that they decided not to prosecute because it was too weak. So it's all kind of a big stretch because you'd have to prove a few things. You'd have to prove that Trump knew about the payment, which he denies, that he instructed Michael Cohen to make the payment rather than Cohen acting of his own volition. Cohen is his lawyer who was the fixer. Cohen says Trump told him, but Cohen also settled and flipped on him to get a deal. So how much can you really put stock in what he says? You'd have to prove that not only that Trump directed it, but also that he did so with the explicit and sole purpose, pretty much, of helping his campaign. Whereas he could just as easily argue, no, I did it because I didn't want my wife to find out about the affair, or I didn't want my public image to be viewed as a adulterer, right? He could argue other reasons, and you'd be in this weird place of having to prove his true intent that would be, barring some smoking gun, extremely impossible to do beyond a reasonable doubt. That's why, like, even some left of center legal commentators are saying this is a weak case. And on the other hand, conservative law professor Jonathan Turley actually called this case legally pathetic in an op-ed. And here's a clip of him discussing the story on Fox News.
Well, this is the ultimate gravedigger's indictment. He went back 7 years to dig up what's really a misdemeanor under New York law. And he's trying to use that to combine it with parts of the federal code to litigate a federal election violation that the Department of Justice declined to bring to court, declined to charge. Now, if that's not weird enough, he has to be able to make that linkage because he's run out of time. I mean, the statute of limitations on that misdemeanor is just 2 years. So there's a great deal of problem with this indictment that's being reported in the media. But the real problem, I think, ultimately is the weaponization of the criminal justice system for political purposes.
So I think this is actually true. I do think increasingly you're seeing both sides start to turn to the criminal justice system to go after political opponents, right? And whether that's just in their language or in actual actions, it's increasingly something crop up from lock her up. You know, Trump was saying that in 2016 about Hillary. We've seen numerous interactions of this, and I think it's a problem, right? I actually am personally of the belief that the Constitution didn't go far enough in putting actual repercussions in place for people who are in office who violate the Constitution. I do think that there should be actual legal consequences for that. And I think at times you should go to jail. I think if you're doing things like the Twitter files and coming in and having Americans censored and kicked off public platforms as a politician, you should go to jail for that. So I'm not of the mind that we should never have the legal system or the criminal justice system involved when it comes to dealing with politicians. But the problem I have is when you start to use it as a weapon just to go after the other side because you don't like them, because you don't want them to succeed, and you're just sort of grasping at straws. I do think after taking all of this in, this is a huge stretch to try to go after him for. I think there are other things that you probably could credibly try to go after Trump for, some of his behaviors and things that he's done in the past couple of years that really did violate the law. This seems quite desperate. I feel like this DA is trying to make a name for himself. This is something we see a lot with prosecutors, actually. There's really perverse incentives across the board in the field of being a prosecutor because these people are elected. They are typically ladder climbers. You very rarely see somebody who intends to just stop at being a district attorney. They usually then use that to run for attorney general or to go run for governor or to go run for president. And so these kinds of cases can really get their name out there in the news, can help them get a bigger support base, help them raise lots of money. And so you see that they become interested in things that are really widely outside their current role, which should just be determining matters of actual justice. So I think that's probably what this guy is doing. And I don't anticipate that it's going to work out and actually Trump going to jail. But I also think there's other incentives. You know, of course, the left still loves to use Trump as a way to sort of bludgeon the right and say, you guys support this thug, you guys support this womanizer, he goes against all of your values. And the right sort of continues to fall prey for it because while Trump has definitely lost popularity on the right, he does still have a significant base of people who quite hypocritically support this man while claiming to be Christians, while claiming to be people who like limited government, while claiming to be people who care about morality, and even at times wanting to use the government to force their morality on other people, yet rallying around this guy who it does seem, at the very least, very much was cheating on his pregnant wife with a porn star that he then paid off. So I think that they shouldn't be getting involved in this way, but I also think that the right continues to play into their hands.
Yeah, look, I'm of the view that the president is not above the law. I have no problem with prosecuting or arresting a president after they leave office if they truly broke the law, right? Like you would any other citizen. But it almost seems that in this case, like if you're going to do that, you're going to prosecute a president for the first time after they leave office ever, set a new precedent. It should be a slam dunk case. It shouldn't be a reach case. It shouldn't be a, grasping at straws kind of case. It should be the case that if a president does something, or a presidential candidate like Hillary Clinton in 2016 does something that a normal person would have been arrested for, they should also face the same accountability. But it should not be the case that a president, in a case like, for example, if John Smith, a random person, did something like this, most people are saying that person wouldn't get prosecuted.
Yeah.
But if Trump does, because he's under hyper scrutiny as a political figure, he's going to get the hammer. And a really grasping at straws kind of case. That seems wrong to me. It kind of seems like the opposite of this approach. We shouldn't be avoiding prosecuting any politician because that could be political, but we shouldn't be essentially subjecting them to extra legal scrutiny either and really stretching. It just seems like a really weak case. From what I've read, Trump, if they do go forward with it, will beat it in court. And then what? That will have backfired tremendously. I mean, it'll have just vindicated him. I will say the one bit of this is that people on the right are rallying around Trump saying this is a politicized prosecution, this is a witch hunt. And I basically agree with a lot of that. But let's be honest, you are still defending the guy who cheated on his pregnant wife with a porn star and paid her to cover it up. From the evidence we have is pretty strong of that. And while that shouldn't really be considered a crime, it's immoral, and how social conservatives can be okay with that is really glaring to me because it doesn't track.
No, it doesn't compute. It's something that honestly, if I'm going to be completely blunt, the Trump phenomenon in 2016 made me doubt my faith more than probably any other political event that's happened or anything that's happened in the country, because watching the evangelical church that I grew up in come in and simp for this person who I thought was outright immoral, who I thought held positions that were contrary to the Christian faith, specifically around issues like immigration, it was really discouraging to me. And I remember sort of having this feeling of like, if this is what this body of people stand for and believe, I'm not that. And I don't really want to participate or be associated anymore, and it really is something that continues to deeply bother me. The number of pastors even that I saw condone this kind of thing or excuse it, when you wouldn't excuse it if you saw somebody on the left doing it, right? You would be very upset, and rightfully so, because these things are wrong and we should...
Like how they responded to Bill Clinton, if you remember.
Yes, it was completely hypocritical and just made me realize that the vast majority of people within the Christian faith don't actually stand for the tenets of the Christian faith when it really comes down to it. It's sort of still a tribalist mentality of like, well, if you're for me and you're in my camp, then I'm going to excuse all these wrongdoings and see no problem with it. And if you're not in my camp, then I'm going to come after you and use my religion against you. And it's just, I don't know, nothing about that to me is what actual Christianity is. So it's always been a problem. Another thing I want to touch on, though, is the fact that they are using campaign finance in this way to go after him is something I see really commonly done at the state level as well, where people get tripped up on campaign finance. And it's because, to be quite blunt, campaign finance law is very dense, very complicated, and I think pretty easy to go awry of. We have this mentality that if you have all these restrictions on how candidates can fundraise and how people can spend money within the political system, that you'll somehow tamp out corruption. And it's a really naive mindset, because basically you're saying that you think the money itself is the problem, when really it is the way that money gets spent. So you have people who really hate Citizens United, which was a Supreme Court decision that basically said donors can be private and then companies can spend money as speech. And all those things, I think, are the wrong way of looking at things. I do think there's a problem with the money in politics. But I think that the problem lies with how people fundraise, not the amounts that they can fundraise or how they spend those. So if I had my dream world, the way I'd like to see things structured would be, if I'm in Georgia and you're my lawmakers, you can only raise a certain percentage of your budget outside the state or outside your district. Because when I, as an individual, am your constituent and you're supposed to represent me, and I'm capped at donating at like $250 to somebody, but then a company or a large donor outside the state or outside the district can come in and give them money through a PAC in the millions of dollars, that's a huge problem. It doesn't matter that it's coming from a PAC or coming from me, the individual, and the amounts don't, it's more so that like the money is coming from people who you don't represent. And so then you are beholden to people and interests that you don't actually represent. And you're going to make laws and policies in their favor instead of based on what the people who are sending you there to do actually want. And I think that's the actual thing that's really skewed in our political system. And if you ever wanted to get a hold of the money and the problems, one, you just need to limit the power of the government, period. Like that would shore up a lot of these issues. But two, I would say you should look at sort of those kinds of limitations instead of what they currently do. And what they currently do, I think, ends up being more of a way for them to go after politicians in this sort of manner versus actually tamping out corruption in the political system.
Yeah, I agree with you. Like, of all the things to go after and try to break precedent, to prosecute a president over campaign finance, like nobody's hurt by a campaign finance violation. That's such like a minor and technical thing. It's of all the things they could choose from that Trump did before, after, and during his presidency that arguably violate the law. It just seems like, because with a prosecution of a politician, you have to also make a case to the public, not just a legal case, right? You have to make a case to the public. I think it's going to be a really hard sell that we must break all of American history's precedent to go after him for not disclosing an in-kind campaign donation. Give me a break. I mean, the whole thing, I think, will not go well. I think it might actually redound to Trump's benefit in some ways. And he is not going to be headed for a long-term prison sentence anytime soon. So it's not just Trump that's in legal jeopardy at the moment. TikTok, the company owned by ByteDance and the most popular social media app among young people these days that Hannah and I both have used, is in the hot seat, right? It could actually be banned soon by the U.S.
Yeah, that's right, Brad. According to ABC News, TikTok has undergone a years-long review by the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States, which could result in a ban of the app or a forced sale of the company's U.S. operations. Despite momentum among lawmakers for a full U.S. ban, the likelihood of such a move remains low, experts told ABC, citing the dramatic intervention into the private sector that it would require. But I'm not sure I agree with them. According to other reporting from Time, they say the contentious debate over TikTok's future reached a new peak on Wednesday after the Biden administration threatened a nationwide ban on the popular video sharing app unless its Chinese owner promised to sell its stake in the company. TikTok confirmed this to Time, and the apparent ultimatum by the Committee on Foreign Investment in the U.S. marks a major escalation by White House officials in the long-running negotiation between the company's Beijing-headquartered owner ByteDance and federal officials who say that TikTok's link to China poses a potential national security threat.
So why exactly do they want to ban it again? Can you run through that for us, Hannah?
Yeah, so let's dig into this because it's kind of nuanced, it's a little complicated, and I'm really curious to get your opinions because I'm sort of on the fence about a lot of this. But basically, since the app launched in 2016, it has taken over social media. They have almost 1 billion active users, including more than 100 million in the US.
Wow.
Yeah. But of course, all that growth comes with concerns from federal officials and security experts because China's Communist Party, the CCP, could have unlimited access to sensitive data that the company is collecting on Americans and all their users. Because as a Chinese company, ByteDance is subject to a national security law that requires it to turn over its data to Chinese authorities on request. So the push to ban TikTok in the U.S. is largely led by Republican lawmakers who are concerned that ByteDance basically could be using user data to track browsing history and location, and they say potentially driving misinformation efforts online. And they are increasingly being joined by more and more Democrats as well, who are also worried about misinformation, one of their favorite subjects. We've actually already seen some states like Florida, Louisiana, West Virginia, and Pennsylvania pass their own bans on TikTok for some state agencies and on government phones. And the U.S. is not the only country that is currently considering banning or doing something to minimize TikTok's impact. In 2020, India imposed a ban against several Chinese-owned apps, including TikTok and WeChat, due to privacy concerns and security concerns amid ongoing tensions at the China-India border. Pakistan has temporarily banned TikTok at least 4 times, citing concerns that the app promotes immoral content. Afghanistan's Taliban government banned the app in 2022 for leading youth astray. And then a number of governments, including Canada, us, the US, and Taiwan, have moved to restrict access to the app on government-issued devices. And on Thursday, the UK became the latest country to ban TikTok from government devices. So far, we've not seen a ban on TikTok in Western countries, but we have seen limitations, especially around government phones and those kinds of concerns. And I think that there is some credibility to this. I have serious concerns about these actions as well. But to me, this topic is a little bit more nuanced because of the CCP's involvement with the app. And I do think that while normally concerns over apps collecting data are overblown in the US, because usually if you have an app like Instagram or Facebook, you have some people who say, oh, they're collecting your data. And I'm like, yeah, just sell me stuff I want, or to make my algorithm more tailored to things I like. Like, I'm not that worried about these companies having my data. As a whole, it gives me a much more pleasant experience. And it's basically like having a personal shopper on Instagram. I love everything they show me. But when it comes to China collecting our information, I could see where you would get some concerns over that, although I still think it's a little bit overblown, because even if the Chinese government is collecting data on me and knows where I like to shop or knows what I like to do, it's not going to really be that big of a threat to me as an average American citizen. However, I do understand the move to ban it on government phones, because let's say they're getting data on a government official and they can use that to blackmail them, or they can use that to get sensitive information about the U.S. government's operations. Sure, that could be a problem.
Yeah, I agree with you. I will say, I think there's a few buckets here. The concerns about TikTok wanting to ban it because of misinformation or corrupting the youth or all that, I dismiss out of hand. That's ridiculous. Welcome to free speech. You can find all that crap on all the apps. Get out of here with that. That's a joke. Now, the concerns about it being essentially Chinese spyware, where they ultimately could have to turn over their data to the Chinese government, I think are much more legitimate, although, again, perhaps overblown. The issue, though, like what you said, is not just that they'll get your TikTok data, but there's actually concern that if you have TikTok on your phone and you authorize it, it's monitoring what you do on other apps and your keystrokes and your passwords and other things. Now, that gets highly technical, and I'm not 100% sure how legitimate or how much they're truly doing of all that. But the concern is more than just the fact that they'll know what kind of videos you like, though even that could easily be used to blackmail. Think of a closeted gay employee that works for the federal government. China has blackmailed many government employees of the U.S. in the past. But it's also concerned that they could access other data on your phone that's sensitive. So I think that is legitimate. I think I definitely agree with the move to ban TikTok on government devices. I mean, right, these are your work phones. If you work for the government of a state or of the feds, yeah, of course, a potentially sensitive, Chinese app shouldn't be on your phone if you've got secure material on there, and just use your personal phone for it. It doesn't seem like there's any real downside to such a restriction like that. However, I think that banning it overall becomes much more problematic, even if there are real risks. One, I'm kind of skeptical about their ability to actually enforce such a ban. Like, for example, a young person, couldn't they just set their VPN to Canada or to anywhere else and then just go on TikTok anyway? Like, I'm pretty skeptical about their ability to enforce such a ban. And secondly, I have some free speech concerns about taking away what is a massive platform for information and news and debate and discussion from people. I think on the private side, beyond the government restrictions, which I think are reasonable, but instead of banning TikTok outright, maybe the government could just educate people about what the risks are and then let them decide for themselves.
Well, so I want to get into the free speech thing in a minute, because I think there's a lot to unpack there as well. But for its part, TikTok is fighting back pretty strenuously. They claim that they have never turned over information to the government. They're willing to show their records. Their CEO actually went on the defense on TikTok this week. Let's roll this clip.
Hi, everyone. It's Shou here. I'm the CEO of TikTok. I'm here in Washington, D.C. today, and I have some news and updates to share with everyone here. Today, I'm super excited to announce that more than 150 million Americans are on TikTok. That's almost half of the US coming to TikTok to connect, to create, to share, to learn, or just to have some fun. This includes 5 million businesses that use TikTok to reach their customers. And the majority of these are small and medium businesses. Now, these numbers are amazing. And I'm so thankful to all of you and the 7,000 TikTok employees in the US who are helping us build this incredible community in America and around the world. Now, this comes at a pivotal moment for us. Some politicians have started talking about banning TikTok. Now, this could take TikTok away from all 150 million of you. I'll be testifying before Congress later this week to share all that we're doing to protect Americans using the app and deliver on our mission to inspire creativity and to bring joy.
So he's making a pretty emotional plea here, and I think he's being very smart because, as he points out, it's almost half the country that's on TikTok. People like this app. Me too. I think it's kind of a little bit funny that the Biden administration is thinking about doing this, because I'm like, can you imagine the backlash from Gen Z? If anything actually gets these people politically active and like ready to picket, this would be it. I mean, this has become the top app. I think it's the best app for video streaming. I get a ton of information from it. I would personally be pretty annoyed to lose access to it. So I think the way that he's going about framing this is pretty smart. He points out just how many businesses are using it. TikTok has been a massive economic generator, not only for content creators, but for small businesses. I often see real estate agents on there, therapists on there, all sort of like using their craft to educate people more about it, but also to find new clients. And so this is a huge industry that's built up around TikTok. And so he's going to be testifying next week, I think, pretty strenuously against this. And TikTok has put out some statements about these potential bans. And they said the best way to address concerns about national security is with the transparent U.S.-based protection of U.S. user data and systems with robust third-party monitoring, vetting, and verification, which we are already implementing. So they're basically saying if you're really concerned about national security, you're really concerned about, the privacy, put rules in place and we're happy to comply with them. But forcing us to sell the company or banning it outright makes little sense. And according to Politico, they're actually getting ready to do something that I think is pretty strategic and quite fun. And just like it shows that they're a bit more cutting edge compared to the old dusty politicians they're up against. They're about to infiltrate DC with their influencers this week. According to Politico, the influential social media app TikTok is flooding the nation's capital with influencers next week as part of a 11th hour lobbying blitz to starve off the for sale of the company. Lawmakers in Washington debating TikTok should hear firsthand from people whose lives would be directly affected by their decisions, said TikTok spokesperson Jamal Brown. We look forward to welcoming our creators to our nation's capital, helping them make their voices heard, and continue to drive meaningful impact in their lives and for their communities. Now, this is a problem for politicians because I think they underestimate just how much influencer media has taken over. People have a lot more faith and trust in influencers that they follow on TikTok. And some of these people have hundreds of millions of followers, to be clear, than they do in the government or than they do in traditional news outlets. These are people that are sort of revered and held up in our culture. They have a lot of sway. And that's why they can command so much money on these kinds of platforms. So I think when you start pulling them in the political sphere and getting them ready to go to battle, I think that the government's going to be up against more than they might be asking for in this situation.
Yeah, for sure. I think there's a mountain of influencers who will be very upset if TikTok is banned. I personally wouldn't be necessarily, policy-wise, I don't agree with a ban, but because I have personally been permanently banned from TikTok twice, because they are very censorious and very left-wing, and I was banned for no legitimate reason whatsoever both times. It would be good for me because more people would probably use Instagram and YouTube where I'm growing and creating tons of content, but I still don't really support it and taking away options from people. I will say this though, the reassurance campaign by TikTok to say, no, we're good people running here. There's Americans working here. We care about your privacy, all this stuff doesn't really reassure me all that much because the thing about the Chinese national security law is that they can force ByteDance to take the TikTok data and give it to them. It's like, even if the people at this company don't want to hurt us or betray us, there still can be forced by the communist government in China to turn it over. So it doesn't really assuage all the concerns for me that the people in charge of US TikTok are, not anti-American or do care about their customers. Sure, I believe that, but it's not really addressing the issue here.
So I'm with you on a couple of things. I think whether or not they're spying on us and to what extent is a little bit unknown, but there are some threats there to be sure. Do those threats outweigh the serious constitutional issues with taking these kinds of actions? Of that, I am not convinced whatsoever. I think there are serious free market and free speech violations that would occur for the U.S. government to take these kinds of actions. And I think that the U.S. government is actually, while they're using national security as like their reason that they want to do this, I think it has a lot more to do with their fear over the impact TikTok can have. Again, we know that many people in the government are constantly trying to tamp down on misinformation, which is basically decided by whatever they think the truth should be. And so TikTok's algorithm is specifically more open than many of the other platforms we use. I find it easier to get messages out on TikTok to reach new audiences. I think that that is a threat to entrenched powers. I also think that you saw some ability for TikTok to have sway in elections, and I think that scares the bejesus out of them because people are having these kinds of conversations on the app, and I think that those kinds of concerns probably outweigh their concerns over national security. So I have those issues offhand. I also think that these kinds of actions are continuing to further what is increasingly becoming a Cold War between us and China. And I think that that should be of concern to everybody. The last thing we want to do is get into any kind of conflict with China, which is increasingly getting tighter and tighter with Russia. And these kinds of actions...
Hang on. Are we already in one, though?
I think we
Isn't
already
that a little
are,
naive?
yeah. No, I am saying I think we already are in one. I'm saying this sort of thing escalates it. And it's just
But
one of those...
they're already doing this stuff to us. They're already stealing our intellectual property. They're already hitting us with tariffs. It's like, I'm not so persuaded by that because whether we want to fight back or not, they're waging war on us in all sorts of ways.
Perhaps, but is this the smartest way to fight back against it? I don't think so, and I think it actually
might not be, totally.
Your own people against you. I also think that there are, besides like misinformation, the real problem, the actual weapon I see of TikTok is the ability for the Communist Party and communist people who work for the company to use it to sway our culture against our foundations. And that's what I actually observe being on the app all the time. It is actively promoting Marxism. It is actively promoting like hating your boss, hating your landlord, that you're a victim. It's actively promoting how much better life is in other countries. Like I get that at my newsfeed all the time, like leave the US, everything's so much better outside the US. It's actively promoting anti-capitalist views. That's one reason you and I felt the need to get active and go back on TikTok and start fighting back on these things, because I know that more than anything else in politics, moving the culture moves the needle. If you turn the culture against these ideals, against these foundations, that can actually have long-term repercussions in our political health as a country and our ability to maintain support for things like the Constitution and capitalism. So like to me, that's the actual biggest threat of TikTok, is their ability to kick off people like you for absolutely nothing who are promoting capitalism effectively and promote communism. But all of this comes down to China's bad. We know that, right? All these things are very bad. But I'm a firm believer that you don't defeat bad ideas with more bad ideas. And when it comes to things like banning TikTok, I do think that that is a serious free speech violation. And I want to read to you, the ACLU actually has come out really stringently against this action. They sent a letter to the House Foreign Affairs Committee a couple days ago, and they urged members to vote no on this bill that would basically ban TikTok. And they said it violates the First Amendment rights of millions of Americans who use the app to communicate and express themselves daily. They said Congress must not censor entire platforms and strip Americans of their constitutional right to freedom of speech and expression. Whether we're discussing the news of the day, live streaming protests, or even watching cat videos, we have a right to use TikTok and other platforms to exchange our thoughts, ideas, and opinions with people around the country and around the world, said Jenna Leventoft, who's a senior policy counsel at the ACLU. And as the ACLU noted, when former President Trump tried to ban TikTok nationally in 2020, selective bans of entire platforms could cut off the flow of information, art, and communication that social media provides, interfering with communities and connections users in the United States have with each other and with people around the world. This interferes with freedom of expression and association and violates the First Amendment. And finally, they said the law would exempt, quote, quote, sensitive personal data from the protection of the Berman Amendment. And that was an amendment that was passed in 1988 that basically protects our rights to receive information regardless of what country that information was created in. So that means the U.S. government can't ban a book by a Chinese author simply because it's from China. Or in this case, you can't ban a social media platform simply because the app is from a Chinese company. So I tend to agree with most of that and think that this would definitely be a free speech violation. I also think it would have very serious free market implications on other businesses, on content creators and on employees. I mean, the scale of what this would do to disrupt the economy and the infrastructure that's built up around TikTok would have serious implications on millions of American lives.
Yeah, I think that even if the U.S. does move forward with a TikTok ban, it will get challenged in court and may well be struck down on First Amendment grounds. I'm not sure. That will be a complicated debate, weighing national security against the First Amendment. But I would expect those legal challenges to take place, making it even more of a dubious solution, because I have a lot of concerns about TikTok, but I tend to think the best way to combat them is with alternative platforms, alternative voices, pushing back in the marketplace of ideas, not coming in and depriving 150 million Americans of their freedom of information and the app that they want to use.
I also think it could set a really bad precedent, because while China might be a problem, allowing the U.S. government the power to ban platforms or information streams just because of the country they come from, that's not a precedent you want to set. So as a whole, I'm rooting against this, but we'll see what happens. Let's move on to our quick hits.
So up first, we've got a moment that went viral this past week that the left is just loving, where a conservative author, Bethany Mandel, who's actually a friend of mine, she was on The Hill's show, Rising, with Robbie Schwab, another friend, and Brianna Joy Gray, who was a progressive. And she was on there to discuss her book, which is in part about indoctrination of the youth with woke ideology that's available now. And the host asked her to define woke, and it didn't go great. Take a look at this.
Of Americans consider themselves very liberal, and probably fewer of them consider themselves to be woke. And so, when we talk about traditional,
what does that mean to you? Would you mind defining woke? Because it's come up a couple times, and I just want to make sure we're on the same page.
So, I mean, woke is sort of the idea that this is going to be one of those moments that goes viral. I mean, woke is something that's very hard to define, and we've spent an entire chapter defining it. It is sort of the understanding that we need to totally reimagine and redo society in order to create hierarchies of oppression. It's hard to explain in a 15-second soundbite.
Yeah, look, time.
So look, I'm a fan of Bethany. It obviously was not her finest moment, and she should be able to come up with a definition of woke. I think she's got a lot going on in life and just had a brain fart. Happens to the worst of us. But it's been dragged on the left wide and far, and I think they have something of a point that the right has started to use woke as, and I use it too, to be clear, as an overbroad buzzword. But I guess let me say this. If I was asked to define woke, I would simply say at this point it's a catch-all phrase for far left ideas on gender, race, LGBT issues, and other things like that. But I think there's a point there that it's become widely overused and doesn't mean a whole lot anymore.
So oh my gosh, my heart broke for her when I watched this clip. I saw people dragging her for filth
It's my
online.
worst nightmare too, as a commentator. Worst nightmare. As
someone who is on TV, I can't tell you that kind of moment happening is something that is on your mind, that you fear every time you go on TV. It is terrifying being on TV. I'm on TV every week, and I tell you, I still have anxiety. It is nerve-wracking. Oftentimes, you're in a situation where you can't even see the person you're talking to. It's you staring at a camera. Cameras, for whatever reason, make a lot of people just go blank. I can't explain the phenomenon, but it's hard being on TV, and it's hard in the moment always being on your feet. Now, I would think somebody who wrote a whole book on being woke and who's out promoting it would have that ready to go, because I think, for me, I can already tell this is a gotcha that people are trying to catch people up on the right. The word comes from the left. The left is the first one that started calling themselves woke, meaning that they're just so awake and aware of the world's problems and more informed than everybody else. But it really has come to be sort of used in a mocking way against them, because they think they're so aware and woke, and yet they don't understand the basic problems that they're trying to fix. And their ideas usually involve more government, which created the problems in the first place. And it really has become sort of a catch-all phrase that I think can have little meaning, right? That there's a problem. And I do say woke. I've noticed sometimes when I'm speaking, I usually don't use it in writing because I think it's hollow. And I think when you're trying to reach people and you want to change them, and in this situation, you'd be wanting to reach people on the left and change them, using words that don't have strong meanings or definitions to them, or trying to use words against them that they've adopted, is not really the best strategy. So I've actually had disagreements behind the scenes with former bosses I've had about how wise it is to really use this as a term that often. And I think this clip kind of encapsulates those pitfalls. But I hated this for her. I do think if we're going to give woke a description, your description works just fine. It's basically a far left ideology, progressive economics, social justice warriors. And as a whole, to me, being woke usually means that you've got such an open mind, your brain falls out, right? Like,
Right.
that you just like aren't concretely thinking with logic or reason anymore. You don't have basic definitions for words, and you're just sort of an NPC who wants to push a left-wing agenda you haven't fully thought through because it's the thing to do at the moment, and that's what you think you need to do to look good and virtue signal to others that you're a good person. So as a whole, I hate that this happened to her, and I think that it really did give the left what they wanted, which is to say like, oh, either this is code for being racist. I've seen a lot of people say that. When people say woke, they mean black people. And I'm like, no, actually we mean like a short-haired Karen white woman in San Francisco who's yelling at her manager. Like, it's not a racially coded term. And it's not a term that has just absolutely no meaning, but it has been so overused that it's losing its value.
No, I do agree with that. And I will just say, actually, Brianna Joy Gray, who is the progressive host in this clip who asked this question, I've battled with in the past. I went on and debated her. But I actually think it's a fair question. I don't really think it's a gotcha. Some people are saying it was a gotcha question. I don't think so. I think it just caught Bethany off guard. I think she's been up late. She has lots of young children. She does know how to define woke. She talks about it in her book extensively. But she just got caught like a deer in headlights. It happens to the best of us. And I felt bad for her in that moment, but I also thought it was unfortunate the way that the left took that clip and said, see, the right can't define woke. I think most people can actually and have to one extent or the other. It's just one incident where someone had a brain fart and they're extrapolating too far from that. But I also agree, like, I say it, and what I generally mean is exactly that, like the TikTokers who say all white people are racist, or, you know, that the term the American people are a melting pot is a microaggression, or like that's what I call woke. And it is overbroad, but I do also think that there's a need for it, because like otherwise what do you call those people exactly? I mean, also, Bethany has pointed out that she was kind of thrown for a loop before that interview because Brianna was saying some stuff on a hot mic beforehand, kind of disparaging families with lots of kids or something. And I think her being a mother of many young kids, that kind of had her shook, and she was nervous and having like anxiety that something was going to go wrong, and then it did. So I can also see that at playing a role in what happened there. But I think overall, the thing is, we have to talk about this because we talk about these viral moments from the left. So I think it's only fair to cover them when they happen on the right as well. But I don't know. It started this whole debate over wokeness, and I kind of feel like both sides have something of a point about it.
Yeah. As an aside, if this ever happens to you, I think what we should do is that Kourtney Kardashian trick. Have you ever seen this clip of her where she's asked something she doesn't want to answer, and she pretends she can't hear anymore? She's like, what? And she's like, I can't hear. I'm like,
well,
that's your
funny.
move.
When I did media trading, I learned a very interesting strategy called, I forget what they called it, but essentially it's like, if you ask me a question I don't want to answer, I say something like, that's an important question, but the bigger picture here is pivot back to my talking point. You just block and move past the question. And so maybe that's what Bethany should have done. I don't know. But let me just say, fingers crossed that neither of us has this happen. It could certainly happen to any of us. But that's what went down and our take on it.
All right. Well, let's head on to our next quick hit, which is a statement the Satanic Temple just released that is quite amusing on many fronts. It says the Satanic Temple will be hosting SatanCon 2023 in celebration of 10 years since founding. They're hosting its second annual SatanCon in April 2023 downtown Boston. It says,
of course, my home. Why do they have to? Of course, it's Massachusetts doing this.
Yeah. Isn't that where the witch trials were too?
Yes. Salem. Yeah. Yes.
I got some weird stuff going on up there. They say the Satanic Temple is celebrating its 10th year since its founding in 2013 by announcing its second annual Satanic Convention, SatanCon, downtown Boston. The event runs for 3 days from April 28th to the 30th and is open to all adults 18 and older who have been vaccinated against COVID-19. Because listen, while you're definitely going to hell and pumped about it, you need to be vaccinated before. So this is hilarious to me. One, I had no clue there was a SatanCon. And I mean, honestly, if I lived in Boston, I'd probably go just to be a fly on the wall, like just
make
to
some
people
content, interview who goes to SatanCon. I would love to know, but it's just hilarious to me. They're literally having a satanic convention and they're making sure you got your booster. I mean, it's just, I don't know.
I thought Satan worshipers were like rebels, counterculture, like drinking blood.
Here they are enforcing like the mainstream NPC narrative 3 years later. I just don't get it.
I'm very amused by this as a whole. I mean,
I will say this. Right when the vaccines were available, I sort of understood private events doing this, but to now know, and look, I still chose to get the vaccine. I still think it protects you against death and serious illness in many cases. But one thing it most certainly doesn't do is stop the spread of COVID. We all know this. So for you to demand people be vaccinated to enter your events at this point is authoritarian and indefensible, right? You're not creating a safe zone. You're just policing people's private medical decisions and trying to exclude people from society who make choices personally you don't agree with. To me, any event, whether it's SatanCon or anything else, that at this point is requiring COVID vaccines is a huge red flag.
Also, I'm sorry, if you're a Satanist, maybe I just wildly misunderstand what they're about, but aren't you all about like death and destruction and evil? Isn't that your vibe? So why are you trying to guard against severe deaths and illness? Sounds like
I don't know.
Right up your alley. Very confusing. All right. Well, as you know, here in Georgia, we have been rapidly advancing a piece of school choice legislation. I've been involved in this on the ground through one of my contracts. We're actually taking another vote on it this morning. And it's doing very well, but it has had some pushback from your usual suspects, cough Democrats. And yesterday, one of our representatives gave a statement against the bill that went viral because she said the quiet part out loud. Let's roll this clip.
I see access as a problem. I see parents being able to direct their child's education, and they are already in the lower 25 percentile, meaning a lot of those parents did not finish high school and could not finish their own education. I am extremely concerned that we would put money in their hands in that entire piece of life in the hands of parents who are not qualified to make those decisions, and they don't have the money to put in the difference that their child would need to attend a private school if there were one in there already in their
So that was Georgia Rep. Lydia Glaze, a Democrat, and she really did just let the cat out of the bag there. She thinks parents are too stupid to be trusted with having the money for their child's education put in their hands, and then they can choose the best school for their kid. She says, we can't do that because parents are too stupid and uneducated to know what's best for their kid. Wow. Just wow.
I mean, first and foremost, if their parents aren't educated and didn't finish high school, isn't that even more an indictment on the government school system that is failing to educate them and help them graduate and be prepared for life? Like, I mean, it's not like saying the quiet part out loud. You're actually making our point for us. And just because somebody didn't get a high school degree or doesn't have a huge education doesn't mean they're too stupid to recognize that they were failed in their education and to want better for their kids and to have better ideas about how they might better serve their kids or position them for success down the road. I think this is a disgusting sentiment that is widely held by many people who oppose school choice. They think that your kids belong to them. They think the government knows what's best. They think the government should actually be able to parent your kid and make most decisions. And they think you're too stupid to be entitled to the basic parental rights that anybody who has kids would anticipate they should be guaranteed. So I hated this across the board. I love that it went viral because I think that this is making the point for school choice better than I ever could.
Oh, and of course, as seems to always be the case with these anti-school choice politicians, her kids went to private school, of course. Take a listen to this other clip, she said.
I am for private schools. All of my children graduated from private schools, but I am not for them if we take public school dollars and use them for private schools. We paid for it. and we were able to.
So she's for private schools for her kids. She doesn't want to send her kids to the government school system in Georgia, but she doesn't want poor people to have access to the tax money that's supposed to go for their kids' education and be able to take it to a private school if that's what's best for their kid. She's in favor of private schools for herself and her own family, but not for you and you little plebs. You don't need to have access to those. You can just go to the local school you're zoned into by default, no matter how bad it fails your student.
As long as you're rich enough to pay for school twice, she's fine with private schools or charter schools or whatever choices you want to make for your kids. But you first need to be rich enough to pay the government taxes for government schools and then pay for whatever actual educational path is best for your kid on top of that. But if you're not rich enough to do that, then you're not entitled to make those same decisions for your kids, and you should be stuck in the government school system. It's disgusting. These kinds of people are beholden to one thing and one thing alone, and that is the teachers' unions that pad their pockets and the government bureaucrats who profit off the status quo. These schools have been failing people for decades, and there is no reason to think that throwing more money at the problem will fix it. We already spend almost double per kid per year in the public school system as the average for private schools, at least in the South. There is no reason to think that the outcomes are going to get better just by giving them more money. The problem is that there are no incentives for the school system to get better. There's no competition making them have to compete for those dollars. And as a whole, the school system has gotten so big, so federally controlled, that the actual people working within it who truly want to see better outcomes for kids have very little say over the day-to-day practices occurring. So I think this is awful. I think it makes me even madder to see a Black woman say this, because it's Black kids who have been hurt the most by the government school system. They are the most likely to be trapped in failing government schools thanks to the practice of redlining that trapped Black people in poorer areas of cities for decades and continues to impact where kids go to school. I just reported on a new study that polled Black parents. They are desperate for school choice. They overwhelmingly support these kinds of programs. They say that they feel their kids would be safer, not have to deal with as much bullying, would have better academic outcomes. And academic outcomes impact everything for a person. They dictate what kind of job you're going to have, how much money you're going to make, how likely you are to fall into crime, how likely it is for your family to stay together. These are not small matters. And the fact that people like this care more about answering to their overlords and the teachers' unions than they do the actual prospects for kids in their communities is disgusting to me.
Yeah, it is interesting because the people that progressives claim to care about, whether it's racial minorities or LGBT teenagers, often benefit the most from the school choice programs that Democratic politicians tend to oppose because they get cash from unions that don't like school choice. And that just shows you they don't practice what they preach. They send their own kids to private school, but they don't believe in other families having those same options. I think it's a disgrace, but thankfully we're seeing school choice advancing across the country and moving in the right direction in spite of people like this.
All right, well, let's move on to the mailbag. This week we had a few comments we wanted to highlight. First from Gailey House. She said, just discovered you after recently getting interested in libertarianism after 2020 and seeing how bad it can get when government has too much power. Huge fan already. Finally found people who make sense. Welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, I've heard from so many people that 2020 radicalized or red-pilled them. Yeah, I can see why.
I get it.
Reed said, I had no idea you were located in Michigan, Brad. I knew I liked you for a reason. Yes, I am.
Jason said, this guy has the most perfect teeth ever.
Yeah, I just had to include that one because I thought it was an accurate observation.
You do have very good teeth.
Ray said, this is in the first video I've seen in a long time that told me completely new information. Thank you so much. Great reporting.
And Brian said, okay, cool. You guys are the first ones I've seen state that this law, this is about the ESG segment last week, this law concerns government pension, that it's not a law stipulating how normal everyday money markets can invest. Because if someone wants to use ESG criteria as the basis for theirs, more power to them. I'll keep my investments in a money market designed to get a return. That's right. It is about public funds. And Biden did ultimately veto that bill yesterday.
Ugh. Gross. I want to make sure, how can I make sure that my retirement doesn't go into any ESG baloney? But next up, we've got a comment from Craig who said, Nespresso for the win. FYI, I recently found Starbucks brand Nespresso pods at my local Wegmans. Hopefully more brands jump aboard. I know you like your Nespresso. We had it at the hotel I stayed at over the weekend. I'm sorry I don't like it. I still want brewed pot coffee. I don't want your little coffee in a can thingies. No thanks. Hard pass. Nespresso is better than Keurig though. Keurig is basically just trash water. So I'll give you that much.
Iced coffee pods, Brad. I think that could convert you.
No.
So my hot take is that men who criticize women for taking photos in public places just hate women. Like, I hear the sentiment from men so much when they see a woman take a photo with like a mural or like an Instagram trap, just criticizing her. And I just don't understand it. If it makes her happy, why do you care? I don't understand it at all. I personally love photos, but even if you don't, she's not asking you to take the photo or be in the photo. So why does it get under your skin? I think you just don't like women.
Interesting. I guess I just have never really cared if women wanted to. I don't love taking lots of photos, but I'll take them sometimes. But the only thing I don't like is sometimes you get the vibe from a person that they live their life for the Instagram photo rather than for actually living in the moment. But that has less to do with how many photos they take and more like how they are in real life. Are they always scrolling? Are they like fake? Are they just, posting on Instagram this idyllic version of their lives? And then in real life, they're actually pretty far off from that. I don't like that, but that's kind of a different thing. So my hot take is this. I am all about the freedom to protest. But if you block traffic, you should be arrested. You do not have the right to, at that point, you're violating other people's rights. Free speech? Great. But blocking traffic, closing a road, preventing people from getting there to work, preventing people, ambulances from getting through with people going to the hospital, that is a violation of other people's rights. It's not your free speech. Your ass should be in jail. I don't care whether you're a climate protester. I don't care whether you're a Trump MAGA hat lover who's mad about something. Whoever you are, get out of the road. You're lucky if I don't run you over. But at the very least, you should be arrested. Sorry, not sorry.
Yeah, I have no pushback against that. I think that is also a very ineffective way to actually get things done.
It pisses people off.
Making people mad.
Oh my God, in DC, I have to rant. In DC, we had this group, Extinction Rebellion, that were, I think that's what it was called, this like leftist climate change group. And what they would do is they would shut down streets with protests. And of course, the libbed out local government would never do anything to stop them. But they would literally block traffic, stop people from getting to work, cause a car buildup of cars idling to protest climate change. Meanwhile, how many fumes are being emitted into the environment from these cars all stalled up? And then all these working class people trying to get to their freaking jobs are just pissed off. And now they're going to view your movement more negatively. It's the most self-defeating and annoying thing ever to me.
All right, guys, that's a wrap. If you like the show, be sure to leave us a comment, leave us a review. We'll read it on air. And until next week, stay based.